After 2016 promised so much and delivered so little aside from short, sharp punctuations of brilliance, 2017 has a lot to overcome if it wants fans to believe the hype. It's another blockbuster-heavy year with Hollywood doubling down on major comic book franchises, mega-budgeted sequels and The Rock's career in general, and if the biggest billed titles genuinely do live up to expectations or at least hopes, then we're in for a hell of a year. Looking over the list of the biggest likely releases, that might not be the best tonic for anyone bemoaning the lack of originality in cinema, but 2017 is going to be a golden year for established fandoms. The MC will grow, Star Wars will return, the DCU is still launching and no fewer than $5 billion movies will get sequels. Prepare to eat a lot of popcorn. You may have in mind that which of the year's blockbusters is likely to win the year? Which will take the most money and which will break that almost mythical billion-dollar barrier, that is increasingly being considered a normalized level for success amongst the super elite of franchises. These 20 films will top the box office charts next year. 20. The Dark Tower. Prediction, $550 million. The biggest gamble on this list, and the most likely to potentially not come off, is the long-anticipated, long-gestating big-screen adaptation of Stephen King's fantasy series The Dark Tower. Why it's golden. Even with the inevitable trepidation over the preservation of the sanctity of the original, the established fan base should see it over the $500 million mark fairly comfortably. Stephen King fans are a vociferous lot, after all, and they've been patiently waiting for this one for a decade now. The cast too are big enough draws to pull in some bag on their own, and even if fantasy is still something of a niche, there's definitely scope for success, especially since Warcraft managed almost $450 million. Will it be any good? There's got to be hope. Idris Elba is a great pick for a darkly charismatic lead, even if he's toned down a little too much from the source, and Matthew McConaughey's The Man in Black is a great decision. Whether director Nikolai Arcel is the right man for the job remains to be seen, but he has previous with the excellent Island of Lost Souls. 19. Cars 3. Prediction, $550 million. The Pixar sequel that nobody asked for, Cars 3 continues the huge merchandising money spinner for Disney, and hopefully improves on the second one. Why it's golden. The second one might kill the film's opportunity to make massive money, but there's a reason Disney still heavily cite Cars merchandise in the stores. It appeals to a young male audience and the parents who buy things to shut them up. Get the timing right, and Cars 3 will easily make more than $500 million. It's the merchandising money Disney will be more interested in anyway, which is likely to run even higher. Will it be any good? It could be as bad as the second one, and John Lasseter is genuinely a brilliant storyteller. He just let his own passion for cars get in the way of making a universally appealing sequel. Let's hope it's lessons learned, or this won't be good. 18. Kong, Skull Island. Prediction, $575 million. The latest big-screen fascination with monster movies sees another silly expedition, heading to Kong Island to find the secret of the biggest monkey in Hollywood. Why it's golden. This is officially the second movie in the Kong or Godzilla shared universe franchise, and if Godzilla's success at the box office is anything to go by, we can expect $500 to $600 million spread for Kong, Skull Island. The last King Kong movie, Peter Jackson's in 2005, also did similar money, so it looks like there's a fairly strong trend. The cast has the benefit of Tom Hiddleston in there, who sells movies no matter what, but it's all about the ape, and audiences still love a good monster movie. Will it be any good? Let's hope so. The studios must have seen something to inspire the shared universe idea, not just dollar signs, and the talent on show should assure some quality. It's not all that difficult to make a monster movie really, it's all about the principles of bait, slow burn reveal and the right commitment to the art of concealment and spectacle. Manage those and it'll have a good head start. 17. 50 Shades Darker. Prediction, $600 million. First, let me preface with this disclaimer, This is in no way an endorsement of the 50 Shades sequel's quality. Still, like it or not, the raunchy sequel that's guaranteed to make cinema ushers' jobs an awful lot sloppier, next Valentine's Day is coming to big screens. Or should that be coming? Why, it's golden. The first film made $571 million without being at all good or even close to sexy enough. With a promise of both of those things being improved, the sequel should profit, especially as the original was one of the most pirated movies of 2016. Crack down on that and you'll have a whole new audience of pervs to boost your box office even higher. Will it be any good? Are you kidding? 16. Wolverine 3. Prediction, $600 million. Wolverine's story comes to an end for now with a semi-adaptation of Old Man Logan, with Mr. Sinister in as the main villain. This is Hugh Jackman's big opportunity to sign off, so it needs to work. Why, it's golden. The Wolverine managed more than $400 million at the box office, and that's without the added fan bait of a promised Old Man Logan adaptation, no matter how soft, or the added emotional element of this being Hugh Jackman's last performance as the character, or so he says. Add to that the presence of the beloved Sir Patrick Stewart, and you've got another invitation for fan love, which might translate to a bigger draw at the box office. Sure, the love for the X-Men franchise isn't quite what it was prior to Apocalypse, but Jackman is pretty much the single most bulletproof element of the brand. So if anything can buck that trend, he can. Will it be any good? The Wolverine had some great moments, even if it was a little dull at times, but the move to more iconic comic book material for the sequel should make it more accessible to general Marvel fans. They'll struggle to offer a pure adaptation of Old Man Logan, but even just some of it should be great to see on screen. 15. Jumanji. Prediction, $650 million. Hollywood's biggest paycheck. The Rock breathes life into the Jumanji franchise with a spiritual sequel that will pay homage to Robin Williams and advance the story of the beloved original. Jack Black's in it too, but don't let that put you off. Why, it's golden. It's pretty much a perfect storm for Columbia Pictures. They can trade on the same sort of nostalgia that made Jurassic World so popular last year. They have The Rock, who might as well be a big pile of walking money. And they have the Robin Williams element. It's cynical to say it, but Paul Walker's death pushed Fast Furious 7 at the box office, and the same could well happen here. Will it be any good? The Rock doesn't make turkeys anymore, which is a stunning thing to say of a pro wrestler turned actor, and the rest of the cast is impressive, with Kevin Hart promising to revive the chemistry they had in Central Intelligence. Karen Gillan is always good to watch, and despite the cheap shot at Jack Black, he's still the same guy who made School of Rock and High Fidelity. Let's just hope that guy turns up on set. There's a lot of potential still in the Jumanji universe. The idea is still just as good as it was for this and for Zathura, and it's about time someone dived back in. 14. War for the Planet of the Apes. Prediction, $675 million. The last film might have been slightly worse than the original, but with more action and even more impressive effects it took an extra $300 million at the box office, suggesting that audiences really do have a thing for monkey movies. This time out, Woody Harrelson leads an even smaller human cast, with the friction between monkeys and humans hitting boiling point. Why, it's golden. The franchise is a banker, even if it costs a lot to make, so the margins are tighter, with the sequel improving massively on the first one. I can't see the same improvement, or indeed quite the same level of success, but there's definitely a precedent to suggest that audiences will come out. If fans get wind of the fact that this movie may actually explain how the Statue of Liberty falls, that might push it even more. Will it be any good? Both Rise and Dawn were great films, built not just on good effects, but on strong storytelling and good performances, and there is genuinely enough left in this franchise to provide both. Woody Harrelson is a great choice to lead, even if him as a military leader is a little funny, and you can rely on Andy Serkis to outperform everyone. After the escalation of the last two, all-out war means more action and more drama, and that can't be a bad thing. 13. The Lego Batman Movie. Prediction, $700 million. Expanding both the Lego Movie franchise and the Batman franchise, the Lego Batman Movie is the hotly anticipated spin-off from the most charming film of 2014. Why it's golden. The Lego Movie itself made close to $500 million, but it has arguably become more of a cult since it was released, and Batman was the best part of that movie aside from Chris Pratt. So that's the best part of the amalgamation of two mega brands. It shouldn't be rocket science to see why it would make money. Will it be any good? With the same writing and directorial team behind the scenes and the same gloriously irreverent spirit, then it's an assured winner. The Lego Movie was a charming and very funny film with a great emotional payoff, and if they can use that self-same brand of humor for Batman, it's going to be great. Even just the possibility of seeing more Batman villains done in Lego is worth the ticket price alone. 12. Dunkirk. Prediction, $700 million. If there's any justice in the world, Christopher Nolan's next film will deliver not only on its inevitable Oscar praise and also at the box office. Though little specifically is known about the film's personal plot details, it will follow soldiers on one of the most notorious days in World War history. Why it's golden. It's the Christopher Nolan factor. He had the Dark Knight trilogy, obviously, but even Interstellar, a remarkably high-concept sci-fi with a particularly non-mainstream vibe to it, made $675 million. Dunkirk is more mainstream, it has the added bonus of the historical weight, and the cast is phenomenal. Hopefully it will be the film that deserves its box office success. Also, if every One Direction fan in the world goes to see their boy Harry Styles in it, it'll make millions without even trying. Will it be any good? Of course it will, it's a Nolan. As already said, the cast is great, but it's the story and the director's eye for spectacle that will make this such an essential experience. It's legitimately one of the most hype-worthy movies currently in production. 11. Thor, Ragnarok. Prediction, $750 million. Despite how poor the second one was, Marvel have stuck with the Thor franchise and are channeling two iconic story arcs in Planet Hulk and Ragnarok to hopefully wipe away the sins of its predecessor. Why it's golden. Incredibly, despite being dull in places and flat-out terrible in others, Thor, The Dark World made almost $650 million. That's without the Hulk, without Cate Blanchett's Hela, without the two fantastic established storylines, and without Taika Waititi waging a one-man war of goodwill on expectant fans. Will it be any good? I maintain that Thor is a very interesting character even when he's not in an Avengers setting, and his theatrical universe has masses of potential as long as you capture the right tone. That's somewhere between the grandeur of Kenneth Branagh and the comedy of Ant-Man, and in Waititi, Marvel might have found the perfect answer. 10. Wonder Woman. Prediction, $775 million. Despite all of the issues with Batman vs Superman and Suicide Squad, and even Man of Steel before them, the DCEU has still made reasonable money during its first years. Now the real expansion starts with Wonder Woman finally getting her own movie, and a very definite feeling that this could be DC's version of Captain America. Why it's golden. It's a comic book movie. It's got DC's notoriously committed fans behind it, and it's the first opportunity to really see Wonder Woman in her own movie on the big screen. Assuming it's not entirely mauled by critics, it won't have as much of an uphill struggle as Suicide Squad, but there's still going to be some resistance to a female-led comic book movie, among the typical ticket-buying community. Let's just hope the demographics margin it makes as much as it deserves to, provided it's actually good, of course. What could be a better movie to take your daughter to than this? Will it be any good? Fingers firmly crossed. The trailers have been good, and Patty Jenkins is a very talented filmmaker, even if she hasn't made anything that would appear to translate to comic book movies. And though DC purists will no doubt balk at the parallel with Captain America, that would be a good thing for Warner Brothers to try and capture. There simply haven't been enough period superhero movies, and it's a very intriguing idea. 9. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Prediction, $900 million. Having made an astronomical return, Guardians of the Galaxy remains one of the most surprisingly lucrative comic book movies of all time. It was a curveball and one that most industry commentators simply wouldn't have predicted. Why it's golden. With a cult growing around the film since release, there's absolutely no reason to think that the sequel won't improve on the return at the box office of the original. They've smartly added even more interesting talent to the mix, with veterans like Kurt Russell and Sylvester Stallone coming on board, and there's a genuinely heartfelt story to be explored in Peter Quill's paternity case. There's more than enough interest to guarantee a big return. Will it be any good? If it's anything like its predecessor, then yes. James Gunn is still involved as director and writer, which is probably the film's biggest selling point, and the brilliant central cast have returned, with a promise of Chris Pratt continuing to rule the world and even more cute Groot. The answer to Quill's father question will be a good narrative foundation, but there's also the promise of another compelling villain, pretty much the only complaint with the first one that has any slight justification, but even then it's a little tough. Any addition of Russell is just inspired. Hopefully they won't double down too much on Groot though. He's good, but the team is about more than just him. 8. Spider-Man: Homecoming. Prediction, $950 million. Spidey has come home, and also gone back to school. But he's also sort of an Avenger and he has lots of homework. And new villains to deal with. Complexity. Depth. Your Spidey senses should be positively shuddering. Why it's golden. Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 3 took $870 million in total before the comic book movie bubble really inflated, and the convergence of two mega brands in the MCU and Spider-Man, still one of Disney's biggest merch-shifting titles, should push this even closer to $1 billion. It's a genuinely huge coup for Marvel and a big moment for the MCU, and the box office should reflect that. It's also got Robert Downey Jr. in, which seems to be a recipe for financial success for any MCU movie. Will it be any good? Well, it has to be. Sony haven't given up part ownership of the rights to their biggest fish to see it fail under someone else's guidance, and Kevin Feige needs to prove that that investment will pay dividends too. That will either lead to too much expectation, though the quality of the last two Spidey films suggests there may be some resistance to get too carried away, or precisely the right commitment to quality. It's an exciting prospect either way. And of course there's the fact that Tom Holland's Spider-Man was briefly one of the best things about Civil War, which offers a strong launch pad. Having him team up further with Tony Stark promises to be brilliant once more. Prediction, $950 million. This is where the real Disney live-action hype begins. The Jungle Book was great, Cinderella was good, and Pete's Dragon was a delight, but Beauty and the Beast is on another plane entirely. Why it's golden. Though the animated version only made $425 million in 1991, Beauty and the Beast is widely recognized as one of the most beloved of all of Disney's films. I myself rated it as the best ever animated classic, and I know what I'm talking about, I swear. That means a very strong foundation, and the key demographic of young girls who made Frozen so lucrative will come out again for this. Plus the Jungle Book made a whopping $965 million at the box office this year, and there's arguably an even bigger, more excited fanbase waiting for this one. Particularly as it has Emma Watson in, who is guaranteed money. Will it be any good? Disney have already proven their ability to make exquisite live-action versions of their own movies, and the brief glimpses we've seen of Beauty and the Beast appear to suggest they've recaptured that grand theatrical spirit of the cartoon and scaled it up. In other words, it looks lush. Despite making the last two Twilight movies, Bill Condon has a great track record of Gods and Monsters was brilliant, as was Kinsey, and Dreamgirls was delightful. Let's just hope he's done his homework and watched the original a lot. 6. Despicable Me 3. Prediction, $1 billion. 2 years after the entirely unnecessary but entirely inevitable Minions prequel, Steve Carell's Gru returns as we look in on his new life of wedded bliss. Why, it's golden. Those little yellow bastards are like printing money for Universal. They pushed Despicable Me too close to $1 billion before tumbling over the auspicious line with the Minions spin-off. It wasn't even any good. Their continued presence in the third film will surely mean a similarly excited audience comes out dressed in their hilarious dungarees, yellow t-shirts and goggles outfits. Will it be any good? If Minions is anything to go by, no. The second Despicable Me was okay, mostly, but it felt like a slightly diminished return on the original. The spin-off pushing the yellow scene stealers to the fore was almost unmatchably bad. Let's hope they're reined in a little and Gru gets more of a chance to shine. Fundamentally, the idea of a supervillain with a soft heart is not a bad one, and there's plenty of scope in there for tongue-in-cheek, but observant comedy. Let's hope Trey Parker's new villain proves to be a good addition. 5. Transformers: The Last Knight. Prediction: $1 billion. The franchise that has somehow managed to survive sexism, racism and being absolutely SHT continues, this time with some sort of Knights Templar mythology and even more slanted camera angles and booming, abusive sound effects probably. Why, it's golden. If you want to talk about critic-proof movie franchises, this is the absolute pinnacle. There hasn't been a single good movie in the Transformers series and yet it has made an eye-watering amount of money. Why would anyone suspect it would change and not make $1 billion? Also, by filming in Newcastle upon Tyne, Paramount have basically ensured that the entire city's population will go to the cinema to watch it in the hope of spotting the Greg stay by their breakfast from every day. A friend of mine from Newcastle told me that, this is 100% going to happen. Will it be any good? Not in a million years. But that doesn't mean it won't be hideously profitable. 4. Justice League. Prediction: $1 billion. The DCEU continues with the first real ensemble movie, adding the Flash and Cyborg to the mix, reviving Superman probably and pitting them all against a new rising foe and probably also Deathstroke for some reason. Why, it's golden. Well, for a start, it needs to be. For Warner Brothers' sake. For Zack Snyder's sake. And for the entire DCEU's sake. The DCEU has already made good money, and this is basically their version of the Avengers, so you can bank on an ensemble take at the box office. Hopefully. Will it be any good? The jury is firmly out. Zack Snyder may seem to be addressing some of the issues with Batman vs Superman, and he has new bosses to answer to who might publicly state they've enjoyed the latest 2 movies, but who undoubtedly want to lighten things up. The bits of film shown so far seem to suggest the Flash will add levity, and that Aquaman will add cool, so that's no bad thing. There is definitely a great film in there to be made, it just needs to be done with balance, the right amount of restraint and intelligence. 3. Pirates of the Caribbean: Dead Men Tell No Tales. Prediction: $1 billion. Jack Sparrow is back to mince his way through another swashbuckling adventure in which literally none of the plot or the other characters matter because he's stealing every scene. Why, it's golden. The franchise has already broken the $1 billion barrier twice and very nearly a third time, with only the first film failing to take more than $900 million. That should continue as the strength of the brand and particularly the brand of Jack Sparrow continue to be strong. They've actually added good talent to the cast too, particularly in Javier Bardem, and it's a big tentpole for Disney, so their marketing team should be turned right onto it when it's about to hit cinemas. The return of Orlando Bloom's Will Turner should be a boost too. Will it be any good? Based on the first trilogy, it's probably 50-50, as there were some ropier elements as the series continued. The fourth film, though the most lucrative, was also the worst, despite some good moments. Hopefully the not very well-known directors best known probably from the Marco Polo TV series will be strong enough not to let Johnny Depp go completely overboard with his mugging. The story centering on ghost pirates sounds a winner. It has been before, after all, and Bardem is great, so there should be some hope at least. 2. Fast Furious 8. Prediction, $1.2 billion. Having made an astronomical amount of money for the 7th chapter partly because of the death of Paul Walker, the FF franchise is back with more villains, a Dirty Dozen-style team-up and The Rock as a leveled-up Agent Hobbs. Why it's golden. It might struggle to make the $1.5 billion that the previous film did, but Universal know exactly how to market Fast Furious films, and they've had the added bonus of The Rock doing a lot of it himself on his Instagram. He pulls in the big money for a reason, and a more central role in Fast 8 is a big boost for them. Will it be any good? It might be deemed basement-level thrills, but there is something extremely appealing about the franchise, and the idea of The Rock off his leash as Agent Hobbs is truly intriguing. Around that you'll get the usual thrills, spills and high-octane stunts. The same t-shirt slogan dialogue and the same rippling, glistening masculinity. Get hyped. 1. Star Wars, Episode 8. Prediction, more than $2 billion. Star Wars returns to follow up The Force Awakening to answer all the compelling questions like, is him Plagueis? Is her a Skywalker? Darth Vader? Serious issues. Why it's golden. It's Star Wars for a start, and the last film took a massive amount of money. Suggesting anything but a massive box office take is just lunacy. Will it be any good? The Force Awakens was brilliant, and incoming director Rian Johnson has serious talent, so all signs point towards this being another great addition to the Star Wars universe. If Star Wars really does rhyme, then this also promises to be a grimmer, grittier installment with bigger stakes, a downer ending and more emotional resonance than The Force Awakens. All of that should spell even more interest. Plus Luke Skywalker should have a much more central role, which is a big plus for fans. Which films do you think will make the most money in 2017? Share your picks below in the comments. Thanks for watching. Share, give a thumbs up and subscribe. Stay tuned for more.